We are live, Red Hoop Talk, here for February 2026. So, hiding backstage, we have Michelle Shenandoah. And part of me wants to read through this glorious bio, but then part of me wants to put all the responsibility on to her. So, let's welcome to the program Michelle Shenandoah. We're not hearing you. You're muted? Of course.
Of
That's
course.
That's how we do things around
Hello,
here.
everyone.
Well, thank you for being part of the program. And it's just a pleasure to meet you. I struggle with guests like you because there's this incredible lifetime worth of experience and wisdom and things you've done and things you're doing and things you want to do. So why don't we just start with your introduction?
Okay, sounds great. Well, my name is Michelle Shenandoah. My Oneida name is Galuhianuas, member of the Oneida Nation Wolf Clan of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And I am calling in today from Onondaga Nation territory in Syracuse, New York. And I'm really excited to be here today with you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for having me on Red Hoop Talk.
Well, I'm hoping that we're all going to be a little wiser when this is over, and then maybe
I hope I'm wiser too.
And hopefully you can solve a few of the world's problems while we're at it.
Okay, we'll try. It takes all of us.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I see all over your bio the term rematriation. So I kind of want to start with, we throw a lot of things around: land back, decolonize. We throw a lot of things around without fully understanding what it means. So I'd really appreciate you just articulating the definition or the concept. Or
Yeah, for sure. Well, I founded and run the nonprofit organization Rematriation alongside many of my Haudenosaunee sisters and relatives. And so we started Rematriation as an organization 10 years ago. And at that time, rematriation was still a relatively new word. And even out, across Turtle Island and beyond, it's still a new concept. But back when I decided to start doing this work, I, worked closely with one of our clan mothers. We call her Mama Bear. She's from the Akwesasne Mohawk Nation. And she was, this is kind of the first time I really had started to hear rematriation. And she also learned this word from one of her sisters and mentors, Gudgie Cook, who's also Mohawk from Akwesasne. And rematriation really was birthed within Indigenous midwifery. And it's, the process by, when our children are born and, we return their placenta and, the umbilical cord, back into the ground, and just keeping our babies connected to the lands where we're from. And so this is where this process really came from. And so our clan mother really began to start using rematriation in areas where there were many of our cultural items coming back to us, and folks were using the word repatriation. And she just felt like it didn't sit well with her, and that it was actually a rematriation. And so as our clan mothers go, they are, overseeing our political and spiritual well-being. And so she began to take, the concept of rematriation and moving it into new areas of governance for our people, and many different areas and aspects of our lives, even, within, the raising of our young people and our families and the roles of our women. And so as that was happening, I talked with her and just said, let's really give a definition to rematriation. And so we spent some time talking it out and, looking at what repatriation meant. And, so I said to her, well, what do you think about returning the sacred to the mother? Whereas repatriation is returning, an object or a person back to its original owner or place. And it's founded in patriarch. It's right within the word. So rematriation, really centering, the roles of our women, our connection to the earth, and really thinking about our relationship that we have as people to the earth, to the life givers, our mothers, to ourselves, and our cultural ways. And so we began to really just move forward with rematriation in that way. That was a really long answer to start out with, but I'm glad we went there. And so I asked permission, to be able to name, the work that we're doing here as rematriation. And so here we are, 10 years later, which is really fun.
But there's this weird fear that you have the word patriarchal, and then matriarchal. So it seems to be a very triggering word, because if things are matriarchal, then that means the men are oppressed, right? And it's not like a direct opposite concept like that.
Well, I think, in all reality, I think once you really look at our Indigenous culture, you look at how we operate. And now it's really hard to speak generally about everybody. I can speak definitely as Haudenosaunee people who are matrilineal, matrifocal people, and our clan mothers kind of really are the ones, there to respond to and kind of lead issues, which our chiefs also help to fulfill that desire of the people and be the representative voice of the people. But I find more often than not, when I come into community outside of Haudenosaunee, that, as Indigenous people, they find there's more of a balance. And it's not about one sort of overpowering the other, which is what you really see happening within the Western constructs, but you really kind of see this nice balance between genders. And I think in places maybe where that's off balance, even within our own Indigenous communities, is probably where maybe we've either, we're forced to, assimilate in certain ways, Western culture and colonization that created an imbalance. And so for me, rematriation actually is really about restoring that balance. And so I don't think it needs to be, anything to be fearful of, but actually to explore, for people to really see what is there. Yeah.
But even pre-colonization, on the colonizers' part of the world, things were women led at some point. When you go back, we all are tied to that mother and that Mother Earth. And
Yeah.
I find it interesting that you're kind of East Coast, we're West Coast, and they bury babies' umbilical cords or placentas here too. Like there's something organic about solidifying that, or re-solidifying that connection at birth, that just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah. It's your spiritual umbilical cord tying you to Mother Earth. That's the way I see it. It continues to identify each of us and the connection to the land of our ancestors since time immemorial, right? I mean, that one is used so many times, but it's really true, right? And so it's that connection point. And when we can begin to see ourselves from that place, as many of us know as Indigenous peoples, it changes, it doesn't even changes. It really grounds you in how you see the world and how you interact with the world. And so I think that that's something that, for folks who have settled here, really can begin to understand, Indigenous people in a new way.
But there was so much racism and stereotypes and so much ugly perspective on us when all those ships came over. Uneducated, ungodly, all of these things. And I feel like maybe if colonization would have slowed down enough, we would have a better country today, because we would have a more balanced perspective instead of fighting for equal rights. It seems like such a duh. Equal rights is like, why are we even having court cases or conversations about it? It should be a duh.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, being here on the East Coast, we have a much longer history, with the colonists and the settlers and the early, United States. And so, we have relationships that, go back, 400 plus years with one of our first agreements with the settlers was with the Dutch in 1613 with the two-row wampum that we said we could live, we could coexist here and live, traveling down this river of life side by side, but that we would not interfere with each other's way of life, governance, spiritual way of life, but that we would do so in peace, friendship, and forever. So you can, look up that wampum belt that we have and see those two purple lines that, represents the colonist settlers in one in their ships and their vessels, and then seeing on the other line, our people and ours. And so that is a treaty that the United States and Canada both stepped into, and to assume the responsibilities of those agreements, but they didn't, and they haven't kept it. Well, they did step into it, but they didn't keep it, and so we're still holding our end of the agreement, but we're just kind of constantly educating folks about that. But going back to, your point in regard to, if they had taken time. And the interesting thing is that some did, a lot did actually. And so the founding fathers, who people like to talk about, Washington, Franklin, and Jefferson, the three of them actually spent a considerable amount of time with the Haudenosaunee and Indigenous nations here on the East Coast. There's a really wonderful article I like to refer people to. It's on longreads.com, and the title is something along the lines of, Washington lived in a very Indigenous world. And that really talks about, him, hosting dinners and having these negotiations happen in his house, and he himself was creating wampums wampum belts to make agreements with all of these different Indigenous nations. And when the United States was formed, one of the very first treaties that Washington had called for was the Treaty of Canandaigua with the Haudenosaunee, and calling, for peace and friendship with us, because he knew he wouldn't be able to survive as a new country without us, right? So, and that, protected our territories, acknowledged us as nations. And so that's a valid treaty still to this day. Like, we will receive treaty cloth from that, that treaty. But, in addition to that, Benjamin Franklin, he spent a considerable amount of time studying our governance and how we operated, and was really just blown away by the diplomacy, the role that women served, and the decorum, if you will, that happened, in our negotiations, and was calling for, this new forming, Union of United States to create a confederacy like the Haudenosaunee. But, a lot of people don't know this information. And I'll just give you one more example, was that Thomas Jefferson had spent a considerable amount of time studying Haudenosaunee language. And the reason, though, that he did it was not for a positive reason, but it was actually a war strategy. So he could figure out who was talking to who, so that, when eventually the new United States would come to, attack Indigenous people, they would know how far ahead, the message was being sent that, there was an attack against our people. And so you can see, like, they had to have spent considerable amount of time with our people to know that, but they chose differently, right? And they left out the women. So they had asked, for the Haudenosaunee actually to be a 14th state in their union, but we declined because they failed to include the women. And they said, we can't do that. That's unbalanced. So, you can see there's this early influence, this early interaction. But then once they started to settle into our territories, which was also not done very nicely because Washington had created a campaign against the Haudenosaunee. Um, and it was a war waged against us that just kind of set us off in destroying many of our villages. Um, but eventually these folks, came up to settle in our territories, and many of the women, many of the colonist women, began to look around, and they were surrounded by Haudenosaunee people, and said, "I want what she has," right? Because they, as white women, they lost all power and legal authority, that they had over themselves, like over their own thoughts and their bodies and their children and their possessions, all belonged to their husbands. And the world that they were living in, with surrounded by Haudenosaunee people, they just saw these absolute freedoms that women had, and having the authority within our government and feeling safe and free, and that's what they wanted. And so the women's suffrage movement also started in our territories because that's what they were influenced by. So yeah.
That is huge. And I can see why you would have been a threat. I really do see. You can't come from a thousands and thousands and thousands a year old society that says you are property, you are wife, you are mother, you do as I say, right? To having thought and reading or being taught to
Mhm,
read or math or, all of
mhm.
these things must have been terrifying.
Yeah, and so when they created the US Constitution, women were left out. They just couldn't fathom, women having this, type of authority or position within the government. So, here's the United States hundreds of years later, right, celebrating its 250th, sort of anniversary, and declaring, its independence. And it's still trying to find that balance. But yet,
My mother's lifetime, equal rights, equal pay, right?
yeah,
Like it's not this thing that happened there's still memory of not being able to open a bank account, not being able to buy a car, not being, you belong to your father or your husband just
yeah.
to function.
Yeah,
And
there's a story, that so there was a historian here locally who, sadly she passed away this summer. Her name was Sally Roche Wagner, and she was a white scholar who, was one of the first women to get a women, and gender study PhD in the United States. And after studying one of these suffragists for 17 years, she studied Matilda Joslyn Gage. Um, Finally, one day, something after, a piece of work that she had written or that she had read so many times of Matilda's work just stood out to her. And she was like, wait a second, I'm missing something. And, meanwhile, she was just looking at the suffragists and their lives and what they had done. And Matilda Joslyn Gage was somebody who lived here locally among Haudenosaunee women. And she talked about, um, never was civilization higher, and never was justice more perfect. And that line just suddenly stood out. And she says, what is she talking about? 17 years in. And she realized that she had to undo her own racism because she had been so indoctrinated into the educational system and ways of thinking here in this Western culture that made her think, what do Indian women have to teach me? Like there wasn't much that, that she could gain. So she was really focused in on these women who created, a movement around women's rights. And she didn't realize that she had to look deeper, and she had to kind of really lift the filters up, off of her own eyes and her own thinking. And so as she started to explore more, she, talks about a story about Matilda, being at a Haudenosaunee woman's house. And the Haudenosaunee woman, and maybe she was on a dog, I can't remember, but she stepped out of her house for a minute, And she went outside and was talking to a man and gave the man the horse and took some money. And, the white woman was completely shocked, like, how could you sell that horse? Like, don't you, what are you doing? And she says, it's my horse. Like, I can do what I want with it. Right. Like, it just blew her mind that, she had any right to property. And so you can see, oh, was it a threat? I guess that it really was a threat, because it was completely, women's role within governance was completely excluded from US government.
Well, it's hard to, we're so ingrained in it at this point, going back to Doctrine of Discovery, the perspective that came over, people can't imagine, like you said, the true justice, the pure freedoms. And it's hard to even explain, so I appreciate these like stories in a way to personify how mind-blowing it is to do your own business transaction, to own
Mm,
a business. It seemed like early America, most of the most successful women were the ones that were widowed twice or thrice, right? And then were free enough with the financial freedom enough to make change or do what they,
mm,
do what they wanted. And that was still controversial.
mm, mhm.
So I want to transition to then, like, is kind of what we're talking about, what is in your 10-part PBS special of that understanding female-led, understanding matrilineal. I can't even say the words.
Matrilineal, yeah.
Matrilineal, matriarchal. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna write it on my hand.
Yeah. Well, Rematriated Voices is kind of a long time dream that I had to create a talk show. And I think it was 3 years ago, I was a Soros Equality Fellow, and that helped to give me a little bit of time to separate out from the work I had already been doing at Rematriation and kind of really focus on the development of this talk show. And so it took 3 years to put it together, but we're really very excited about it. And so Rematriated Voices is kind of really focusing in on the folks who already live this way of being, right? Who, whether it's our own traditional leaders and knowledge bearers and community members and academics and so forth, to also to some allies who are doing some really deeply important work that is really helping to restore relationship with Indigenous peoples and community and lands. And so what I did is I, pulled together lots of threads centered around some big topics and allowed for everyone who is engaged in this conversation to really speak on these topics. Oftentimes, I'm sure you experience this as Indigenous peoples, we're called out to speak publicly on different topics, and sometimes it's a lot of the same thing. It's starting at the beginning and having to cover certain basics
Yeah, you
about
have to catch
Indigenous
people
history.
up to a certain point before you can have these
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah, precisely. Because of the fact that, within the school systems, there is a lack of Indigenous based education around our history, our culture, our contemporary issues. And so, you may have experienced this growing up, but I remember as a child when I would go to, or a young woman, I'd go to other places and outside of our communities, and people would say, "Oh wow, like there's still Native American people." Like that doesn't happen today. It's changed a lot in the last couple decades.
A little bit. And there's some pockets that are surprised.
So now people are really very aware that there's indigenous peoples here, in North America, in the United States. And so it is a different reality now, but there's still a huge chasm, this void, that there is such a deficit of real history and information about, from our people, to the interactions that, were so important in even the founding of this country, like what I just shared about the founding fathers. Like, that's just not there. I
It
like to.
gets me because I had to sit through not only history and, junior high, high school, then college. I had to sit quiet and regurgitate. There was never really points of pride growing up for me in public education as an
Yeah.
Indigenous person.
Oh, completely. And, Jennifer, I like to tell this one story that I remember being in the 7th grade, and we had US history. And I remember I was like, okay, it was a thick textbook. It was thick. I know the print was a little bit bigger for for us in the 7th grade or whatever, lots of pictures and stuff, but it was still a thick textbook. And, I remember having to learn, the sort of, these versions of, early American history. And never once were the Haudenosaunee, or other Indigenous nations included in that story. And I remember I got so excited because one day I was like, oh, yay, like there's Native people in this book. And I remember that, here we are, this one book, and I went like this, and that was it. It was on one page and on the other. And it was black and white photos, of Lakota people. I'm sure they probably called them Sioux in the book. And they were, pictures of teepees. And it was very much this notion of, kind of non-existent Indigenous peoples, like, oh yeah, and there's, Native American people in the country, but there was nothing contemporary. And even whatever was shared in that little segment was, it was so uninformed and not really grounded in the lives of, who we all are today, even, for those who were represented in that book. And that was it. And then we marched on. And so that had a really profound impact on me. And that was it, right? That was really, really it. And so even going into undergrad, I had to find a school that offered American Indian studies. And even then, it was just a concentration. It wasn't a major. And I think it's still probably the same way at, one of the Ivy League schools. And I mean, I hope that it's a major now, but I'm not entirely sure. But the interesting part was, even for it to be a major, it had to, let me try to remember this. Everything had to be before a certain date. Like if it came after a certain date, then it didn't qualify for an American Indian study. It was just very weird. And then, I went into law school. And even there, I just was kind of constantly like scouring books, looking for our history. And so either you have to go to the schools where it exists, and even then, you've really got to, work. But there's some great schools in this country where our own people have like really solidified some programs, for our people. But there's a big majority where there's still that gap that resides.
Well, I didn't know until like 15 years ago, every Native studies major that I met was a non-Native.
Wow.
And so I didn't think that we were even allowed to be Native studies majors because there wasn't a lot of us doing it. And then, junior year in high school, I read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, took over my history class, and then got expelled because I was just so tired of hearing the same regurgitated nonsense, or putting these masochistic, terrible people on a pedestal, and having who I was and my bloodline and my treaty signing family just totally be dismissed, diminished.
Mhm.
And it made me crazy. So the lack of not only truth in public education, but the lack of representation, like chipped away at my poor, sensitive, sweet little soul.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
not
Well,
to pursue. It made me not want to feel like I was part of the academia, right? So
yeah. Yeah. I understand. I mean, I read when I went to law school. This is again very telling of how our systems operate. That so I'm as an Oneida. In 2005, the case of the city of Sherrill versus the Oneida Indian Nation, which is my nation, that case was written by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And this case, which ruled against my nation, which was a tax case, but then end up having implications for all of our land claims. It had cited the doctrine of discovery as a basis for upholding, these laws that denied the Oneidas the right to buy back our land and to, as a sovereign nation, not to pay taxes on it, despite giving a financial gift to the city that, had formerly, been using, occupying the land. They weren't satisfied with that because the tax wasn't being paid. But either way, that case, had talked about, that the settlers' expectations had long been established, and to, undo those would be incredibly unfair. But citing the doctrine of discovery, was kind of this moment in there, and then also stating that the Oneidas waited too long, to bring, our claims, and which was kind of really crazy because people don't realize that as Indigenous peoples, we didn't have like a legal standing to be able to bring lawsuits into the courts, right? So once they were finally open, we did. And so it just went on this long, many decades journey of these legal battles with us trying to, do this to get our land back, or get this, do this to get our land back. And despite the courts even saying, yes, this is Oneida land. So where I'm getting to is that, I had decided as a kid that I wanted to follow in my great grandmother's footsteps, that she left a legacy for all Oneida people to, pursue our land claims for land that was illegally taken from us. And so I went. And then that very first year that I was in law school, the doors closed, and that's it. Like this case that I'm talking about in 2005 shut the doors on our land claims, not just for the Oneidas, but for all Haudenosaunee. And so it had really, really big impacts. So I'm in my first year of law school, and I don't understand fully the case and why it turned out the way it did. And what is this doctrine of discovery? I don't get it. And so I'm in a law school where I'm the only Native American person in the whole school. And so I'm sitting in my real property class. And this is a class that every single person who goes to law school has to take this class, and you take it your first year. And it always starts out with this Johnson v. McIntosh case. Everybody reads it, and it talks about the doctrine of discovery in it, and how this is the basis for which the United States claims the land of all of its territories. And it basically, the doctrine of discovery comes out of the Vatican, and
Yep.
it comes out of these papal bulls, which are the laws of the Vatican, and essentially says that the lands are empty because as Indigenous people, we weren't Christian, we didn't have souls, we didn't have a right to the land and
We
to
didn't speak one
resources.
of the approved languages. We
Yeah,
never heard about the Bible, so
right,
we didn't
right.
count enough as civilized or human enough.
Right. And so that still exists in the law, right? And
How?
so and so right, so you see it in, the early, well, first you see it when the explorers come here to the Americas, because that gave them the right to come and claim the land, and, in the name of the crowns of Europe, and to take resources and do whatever they wanted to Indigenous peoples, which was genocide. And then you see it again in 1843. And that's when the new United States is formed, and the Supreme Court is just, starting fresh, and they create the basis for their land, their legal title to the land. And then you don't see it again until 2005 in the case against my people. And so, I thought, what is this? How can this be? And it really, it upset me, of course, and I had to try to understand it. And it took years to understand, what is this doctrine of discovery? And it has real, like, just really, really bad impacts for all of our people, but also leads us to issues like missing and murdered Indigenous women, real contemporary issues that people don't see. And to have someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg cite this, right? Like, and realizing the impacts, upon our people and our women, that's, it's really devastating. And so I was really upset about it for a really long time. But then, now all these years later, I'm thankful that she had cited this doctrine of discovery, because if she had not, it would be harder to point back to 1843 and to point back to 1493 to say, this is not right. Now we can point to 2005 and even more current cases to say, this isn't right. But, kind of weaving through all this is the recognition that it's the law in the United States. And, law shapes policy, and policy shapes education, and education shapes how we treat each other.
And how we think about ourselves and each other.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
guess somewhere in my head, the second that we became America and cut our ties from Europe, the doctrine of discovery should have been severed there, right? Like, if it's a European concept, or a Vatican, or that religious concept from over there, when we said we're not England, that
Well, when
shouldn't
the colonists said that they weren't England, right?
I feel like something should have dissolved that doctrine at that point, or that excuse of a relationship with that doctrine at that point.
Yeah, well, I think that, the recognition, I mean, especially as Haudenosaunee people, we still hold out our distinct, separate identity as our own sovereign nations from the United States. And we relate to each other on a nation to nation basis. And so, but what I do know about the law is that the United States, when it formed, basically what it did is it had incorporated the laws that came from Great Britain. And so that became the basis to have, laws and working laws. And then over time,
foundation of
that was the foundation. Yeah. And so, I guess incorporating the doctrine of discovery at that point also seemed to make sense for them. But yeah, and so people not realizing that this is the law today, and that it's still, is an active vibration and active energy that, pulses into the way that society works. People don't realize it. So anytime people transact with land, buying or selling land, they're interacting with the doctrine of discovery. Yeah. And so,
even with the separation of church and state being, it's a religious doctrine, right? Came out of the Vatican, a religious thing. It's still some.
Yeah. And it's still active, even though it does have a religious basis, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Insane. It's insanity. But what I do appreciate about a lot of people, you mentioned the word allies. There's an anger that we weren't taught things, right? When there's the light switch goes on, there's an anger and frustration. Nobody told me, right? Maybe I would have lived or thought or interacted with people differently if I would have known this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess being aware of the doctrine as an Indigenous person, the majority of my life, I'm just very still upset that it has like a foundational stranglehold
Mm,
still in this we're modern,
mm.
we're woke or whatever. And so to see it still be just an integral thread in that American fabric, it's
Yeah.
making me a
Yeah.
little sweaty.
Yeah. Well, I was part of a delegation that traveled to the Vatican a couple of years ago, and we went there to talk with Pope Francis and to talk about the impacts of Indigenous residential schools. And also, this is when all of the unmarked graves were really like, these children, who had been, voiceless, had decided this is the time for the world to know that, we're here. And so we went as a delegation and to address these issues. And for myself, I went with one of my sisters from Akwesasne, and our clan mother had, one of our clan mothers had sent us. And, there we talked about the doctrine of discovery and to, rescind it, to revoke it, that it shouldn't have any more power. And the response that we received from the church, which was also then reiterated in a statement that the Vatican had released, basically said that they had repudiated it, meaning
What is repudiate
well,
it?
it's like that they didn't agree, with this law, but they didn't say that we revoke it or that we rescind it. And they also said that they didn't take responsibility for what these, modern nations have done with the doctrine of discovery. But yet, the way that law works based on precedents, being able to say that, this is valid law somewhere, and in it, it allows for the law to be valid somewhere else. And so, for myself, I know that, in representing, for our people, and being able to, speak about what many of our leaders had, made sure that I use certain words in regard to revoking and rescinding the doctrine of discovery, was just taking responsibility, right? To
But
say,
the
yeah.
Pope gave an apology, and we're supposed to like, that's what went all over social media. The Pope apologizes, but yet still
Yeah.
this law, this Vatican law still exists.
Yeah. And so
How
by
can you be sorry if you're just laying the foundation to continue the behavior?
That's a good question, Jennifer.
Hey, mama taught me, like, you say you're sorry and you change, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I mean, for me, the way I see it is by revoking it or rescinding it will then not allow, other countries to be able to rely upon it. And so most people don't, number one, know what the doctrine of discovery is. And, second, don't realize the impacts that it still continues to have to this day. So, coming back to one of the things that you had mentioned earlier in regard to the series that's on PBS, Rematriated Voices, one of the episodes that we have is called Mother Law and the Doctrine of Discovery. And so, the clan mother who I'm talking about, Mama Bear, she is featured throughout different episodes on Rematriated Voices. But in particular, this one, we're talking about the impacts of the doctrine of discovery and what Indigenous women are doing to respond to it, and then also how allies are working to overcome these impacts and to make change. So specifically, I'm going to highlight some of my friends and who are really good allies is that Land Justice Futures. And they are working with cohorts of Catholic nuns, and they are very large landholders in the United States, and they are working in some with different cohorts of the nuns to be able to create land justice with Indigenous and Black communities in the lands that the nuns have. And so from creating sea kelp farms in Shinnecock territories to land back that just recently happened in the Great Lakes. And so and they're educating these nuns on the doctrine of discovery and the impacts and what the church, with their role that, they played with, running these boarding schools, that were indoctrinating, Indigenous children and assimilating them by force, how those impacts, play out in our daily lives today. And so, anyways, that's featured in Rematriated Voices. But in addition to that, we have some other episodes on matrilineal men. Like, what is it to be a man and live in a matrilineal culture, right?
I think it'd be pretty darn cool.
Yeah, well, check it out. There's
way less stressful than I'm the head of the household and I have to take care of everybody. And if I don't get a good job, like that.
Yeah.
Mental stress. I think it'd be like, sup, babe?
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah.
here. What are we doing with it for dinner?
Yeah. Well, there's 5 episodes, and the one on matrilineal men, there's 2 younger chiefs, actually, one from the Onondaga Nation and one from the Tuscarora Nation, and the third person there is my husband. But what I love about the conversation is they talk about, being fathers. They talk about being raised in a matrilineal society and how they're able to be men and how they move through conflict and how they have respect for women and for the culture. And so there's that one. There's Eve Meets Sky Woman, which talks about this influence of Haudenosaunee women on the suffragists. We have another one called First Environment, which is the midwife who I was referring to earlier in regard to the word rematriation, Gudgie Cook. A lot of folks know her. She's talking alongside Robin Wall Kimmerer, who many people know. She is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass. And they're talking about first environment, our Mother Earth, our women, our bodies, coming back to that, really that process of rematriation. And then we have another one called Hidden Roots of Democracy. And that is all traditional Haudenosaunee leadership who've been carrying on in these titles since way before, the colonists, came to the shores of, of the Americas, and talking about our democracy. And people can begin to see those parallels between Haudenosaunee democracy and what was incorporated into the U.S. government, right? So, I encourage folks to look that up. You can.
Are they all out now on the PBS?
Yeah, they are, yeah. And actually, at the end of March, we are launching a campaign centered around a screening series for Rematriated Voices, in which we're inviting folks to be a host to watch this episode with your community, whether it's, in your work environment, a community group you might belong to, your family, and then, you'd receive this really nice, like hosting kit to then have some discussion about these topics. Because again, it's addressing those gaps in the educational system that continue to exist today.
That's huge. So, Michelle, I'm going to play a little clip real quick, and then we have a question from a listener.
Okay.
But I have to put my face up on the computer screen to read it.
Yeah.
So we're going to play a little 45-second clip while I shove my face into the computer. So bear with us. We'll be right back.
Join the Everything Back movement and purchase a Cultural Sovereignty Protector shirt today. A Cultural Sovereignty Protector is an advocate who is working to create a world where diverse Native cultures and values are lived, protected, and respected. Cultural sovereignty means having control over those things that make us who we are as Native peoples. Everything Back is our movement to return those things that make us who we are so that we can heal. Purchasing one of our Native-designed limited edition shirts demonstrates your commitment to human rights and equality. Visit indian-affairs.org to check out all of the colors and styles in stock today.
Everything Back. Okay, so we have a question. Can you discuss the Mabo decision and how that differs from the treatment of Indigenous people in the States?
I cannot speak to that because I'm unfamiliar with the with this case and what the impacts are. I wish I could respond to it, but I don't have an answer for that.
No, I appreciate it. I feel way less stupid right now because you didn't know. right? I'm like, okay, I'm not a complete,
Yeah,
I'm not a
yeah.
complete
If
dunce
the
cap.
listener wants to write in a little bit of something, that would be great. So if you want to circle back, we can hear a little bit more about it because they're raising it for an issue. So thank you. I'm very curious. Yeah.
So I want to ask you one more thing because I know you're a busy lady. You mentioned, or part of your um, stellar bio, and you mentioned it too, allies. So Indigenous Concepts Consulting helps non-Indigenous businesses and media companies develop own organizational best practices through an Indigenous lens. Is it? I f- I get weird and guarded because again, even though I didn't go to boarding school, I'm a product of that, right? The paranoia of sharing stuff and people just kind of doing what they want with the every other word they felt like listening to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I certainly respect exactly where you're coming from. And I think that, as Haudenosaunee people, and I'm sure as many Indigenous peoples, like there certainly is, a lot of protection around our culture and a very sort of guarded sense because it's been exploited over and over and over and over again. But what I'm doing, with along with my husband with Indigenous Concepts Consulting is a little bit different. It's not about necessarily culture and ceremony in the sense of going into what are our practices in the sense of more what are principles and guidelines by
Okay.
which we live our lives and how can we incorporate that into a space where we might be able to find more equity and fairness and inclusion. Now, oddly enough, diversity, equity, inclusion these days, seems to be, words that folks run away from. Whereas only like, 2 years ago, it was, something that was really being celebrated. However, as Haudenosaunee people, I mean, we have been focused in on inclusion and equity, fairness and honesty for a very, very long time, way before colonization. And so really centering in on principles that also unite the Haudenosaunee centered around peace and love and forgiveness. So how can we incorporate those, meaning we as human beings, right? And
Mhm.
in the communities we live in, don't you feel it would be nicer if we were all sort of maybe living in principles of peace and peacemaking with each other, right? Thinking about our relationship with each other and how we live our daily lives and looking out at the life that's around us and having that gratitude. So what if folks brought that into their workspace, right? What if folks brought that into their movie making? What if folks brought that into their businesses and in their homes with their families? We could have a different type of society. So the work that my husband and I do, he is a member of the Oneida Nation, and we both bring our backgrounds to our work. He has a background in lacrosse and in therapy and being an ombudsman and conflict management. And then I bring, in these legal perspectives, but he's Oneida, or I'm sorry, he's Onondaga, I'm Oneida. And so as two Haudenosaunee people, we're focused in on, how can we share these values with others and just put them into practice? It's something very simple. It's not about how we run our ceremonies or
Yeah.
any of that that we understand and still hold in a space of protection. So that is a bit different.
Well, it's
So
more like the heart of humanity, right? Those values that stabilize not just, healthy people create healthy families create healthy communities, right? So it's just kind of getting to the core, but we don't think about
yeah.
that in business. Business is supposed to be hard and hard lined, and you're fired and you're 3 minutes late. And
Well, think about this. If folks in the United States knew that the roots of their U.S. Constitution were indigenous, would we live in a different world?
I'd like to think so.
Right. And so we're always kind of highlighting this information for folks to be able to see that there is a different way. the clan mother who I referred to a few times, she likes to talk about, this country being in its infancy, and that it's an adolescent who is misbehaving and it doesn't have a mother, and that, a motherless country is going to continually to misbehave. And that with the role of women not being present within democracy, within governance, is going to create this imbalance. And so, you see things that where people are very sad, people, go without, and people are discarded. And that's not an Indigenous value. That's not an Indigenous way of life. Whereas, we care for each other and help to provide for each other. So those are just very different perspectives, but they shape our societies in very, very big ways.
I'm not going to be nicer to my camera guy. He doesn't get any of my Indigenous values. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But no, you got me. First, I like the roller coaster of this. First, I was stress sweating about the doctrine, but now I'm leaving feeling hopeful, like, okay, we can do this, right? Because the core of this is humanity, right? We are all in this, and I think we all want the same things: safe babies, access to food, feeling respected.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you just got a lot of work to do. Okay, so PBS.
I think we all do.
I'm putting it on you. I'm just going to talk about you talking about it. I'm like, she has this. She'll be fine. She'll fix it for all of us. So, because it's all over the place. So an Indigenous response to Me Too, that is under I got two things. I got Indigenous Women's Voices that you did with our cat Sione. I love her. Her and Bear are my babes. And then you got the PBS series. So which is which? Are we talking about the same thing? As I confuse myself.
No, they're all different. Different works. And
is there a hub to all things Michelle? We can gently stalk you after the program.
If you go to rematriation.org, you will find quite a bit of information there about all of the work that we've done. I do believe we have Rematriated Voices on there, but that's something we're kind of slowly getting out into the wider universe. But the first film you had mentioned, which is a short documentary called Indigenous Response to Me Too. Okay. That we had created as a talk piece when the Me Too movement had first kind of started. And, we said, I said that we needed to have a conversation to put out into the public and for our communities to have conversation around, because sexual abuse that happens in our communities comes from a very, very different place than it being about workplace, violence in the workplace, but it had more centered around residential schools and colonization and how that's impacted our communities. And so that was put out there to create as a talking piece for our communities, to actually have, some conversation with other community members, but also to inform the public, hey, this isn't the same thing, right? So then the second piece that you're talking about is called Indigenous Women's Voices series. And that you can find on our website, rematriation.org. And that I collaborated with Gudjajuni Fox, who is a filmmaker from Akwesasne. She's got incredible films out. So I was really very lucky to work with her to create these pieces. In fact, actually, she's worked on all of our media. So she's a common, thread in terms of, her talents that she brings to our work. And then there's the Rematriated Voices series, which we created and then extended to PBS to help us with distribution for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining, a listener, they want to do a screening. Their business wants to reach out. Where's the best way to just streamline to all things?
So what I would do is go to rematriation.org, okay, and I would sign up for our newsletter, right? You can look under contacts, stay connected. sign up for our newsletter, because then you'll receive regular, information about what we're up to. And you'll also start to learn about this new series, the screening series, Rematriated Voices, where we're inviting the public to engage with us by hosting screening parties, with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your community. And that will be coming out towards the end of March, and throughout April. You'll see more about that. So please definitely sign up for our newsletter at rematriation.org. There it is. Thank you.
I have to it's just not a word I see all the time. So I'm
yeah.
Spell check.
It takes people a minute, but you know what? It's just going to be common, household words soon enough.
I still can't spell even misogyny. It's bad. So
don't worry. That's one you don't necessarily you shouldn't need to have to know how to spell. But you can also go on and you can, like I said, on our website, we do have something about Rematriated Voices, but you can also Google Rematriated Voices PBS, and it will also bring up the series for you to watch. And again, if you're interested, you want to learn more, you want to be a host, which we highly encourage you to do, connect with us through our newsletter. And you can always reach out to us by email, which you can find our contact information on our website. So, and we also are all on social media. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So stay connected.
Well, please, as things happen on your end, just let us know, and we can update listeners and have you on again. And I'm trying to plan my busy weekend going, well, do I have some time for PBS? Because I'm going to make that time.
Yeah. Well, there's 5 episodes, so you'll probably have to make more than one stop onto their website to watch all of the series, but I think you'll love it. And wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on today. And what a real pleasure. Thank you to all the listeners for tuning in and staying connected. And thank you.
I just appreciate your brain and your heart and your work.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling a little bit more positive that we are of value, who we are of a value, what has survived is value, right?
Hey, our grandmothers, taught us well, and we walk in that line of our ancestors, and it's what makes us who we are today. So I'm really grateful to all of them and to my family. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Michelle Schenandoah, rematriation.org. That is the best way just to engage you and get more information. Yeah. But I want quarterly updates. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Well, sign up for our newsletter for sure, but let's stay in touch because we have each other's contact information.
All right. Well, you have a great weekend, and thank you so very much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye. How fun was that? Jeez. It's always hard because, I'm not total moron, but I'm so heart-led, right? And so I always get worried when I interview these just brilliant minds that I'm going to ruin it, or I can't keep up because I can't say rematriation on the first 15 tries. But this is great. So go to your PBS. And then we love our cat Fox. We should get her on at some point. She even does pottery. Quite a talented woman. So I'm trying to see, because it is dating violence month, I'm trying to wait for another Michelle to join us. And I'm texting her now. We're going to end this if you don't get it together. To talk about Dating Violence Month, and she is with the California Consortium on Urban Indian Health. But if I don't see something click clock here pretty soon, we're just going to call it a wrap. So let us play one more little promo, and we can let our first Miss Shenandoah, go forth and save the world. And it looks like my Michelle has connected, so let's get ready to go here after this promo.
The association is a 501c3 that does not take any federal funds. We are powered by the generosity of our members and donors. If programming like Red Hoop Talk matters to you, please consider donating or becoming a member today. Every contribution, no matter the size, helps us continue our mission. You can make a one-time gift or set up reoccurring contributions. We even accept stocks and cryptocurrency. An association membership is just $25 annually or $500 for a lifetime membership. Membership is open to anyone who supports our vision and goals. Donate or become a member today by visiting indian-affairs.org, and together we can make a difference for Native country.
So I'm going to welcome Michelle Sanchez Higginbotham. Now, Michelle Shenandoah, I don't know if she's got stuff to do. She's dismissed, but if she wants to listen and jump in on this, Michelle, my gal pal, friend of mine, it is Dating Violence Awareness Month. What does that even mean? And I thought that like the violence wouldn't be while you're dating and you're on your best behavior.
Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So that's really the key. Sorry, I'm going to mess with my hair for just a moment and make it perfect for you. Hi, everybody. So Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month is just the month where we really need to discuss the issue of dating violence within our youth community, specifically our teens. So teens are considered from the age of around 6th grade all the way through 12th grade. I know a lot of our 6th grade parents are like, no way is my kid involved in a dating relationship. But that's when they're starting to explore what dating looks like for them. And then 7th grade is when they really kind of jump in there. So, yeah, so that's what Teen Dating Violence Awareness
We just
Month
got
is.
done talking to Michelle Shenandoah.
It's the day of the Michelles.
It is. I'm going to have weird Michelle dreams. But like the equal rights, respecting women as more than property, I'm not going to age you. Let's just say our mother's lifetimes, having the right to own a car, do a bank account, right? Have control over birth control, their body, right?
Absolutely.
Marital rape, right? You could force your wife. So it's like this violence or dominance over us kind of starts with dating, right? Or am I just being melodramatic?
No. It does start with dating, right? And when we're talking about our youth, we're talking about them exploring who they are, within interpersonal relationships, right? And so, if these kids are growing up within homes that are not healthy, their relationships are not healthy, domestic violence is within the home, abuse is in the home, then they're taking that out into community and they're exploring that with their peers, right? And if there are not adults within their peer groups that are observing what's going on, they could potentially fall into that violence that consists of emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, even financial abuse for our kids, right? That my mom gave me this money, or this was my money for my birthday and my boyfriend wants to take it, or this was money that I got from my grandmother and my girlfriend wants to take it, So I want to make sure that when we're talking about violence within this interpersonal relationship for our youth, that we're also bringing awareness to the fact that even our young girls can be abusive, right? And we also need to talk about our Two-Spirit community, our LGBTQ community plus community, who could potentially be experiencing even more violence than others because of their inability to share with people what's actually happening within their lives, because they're afraid to be kicked out of their home. They're afraid to be ostracized from their peer groups, so there's a lot of dynamics that happen with our youth that exacerbate the issue.
But there's dynamics that come from the parents, right?
Yes.
We learn by example. So if we're taught it's okay for somebody to talk to you or treat you like this, then you accept it from somebody and then you stay with that person, you have kids, and those kids, like, it really, I feel like getting a grip on some of these concepts is the only way for a permanent change.
Yes. So how do we change, right? How do we change the experience that our youth is going through? Because a lot of times these conversations aren't had within the home, right? Or within community. We're not going to talk.
No, I was just taught, like, don't make out with them. Like, the biggest fear is, like,
you're not allowed to hold
hands.
Like, what was that? Safe room for Jesus. Like,
yeah, like that, you know, you had to have a minimum of 18 inches in between. So, like, when I think back on dating, is he a nice boy? And then just don't make out, basically. That I don't.
Right. Is he a nice boy? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Because
but what does that mean?
I remember as early as like freshman year feeling that pressure that, oh, I bought you dinner, you owe me something. And so there's many dates I walked home because I don't owe you anything.
Yes.
And, you know,
I'd like to share the story of my daughter. I shared this story because I have permission to share this story. And Jennifer, you know this story of her first date. So she's 19 now. Her first date, she was 16. She was really excited to go out with this young person. And the individual took her out to dinner. They took her out to have ice cream. It was really nice. She said she really had a good time. And then all of a sudden I get this phone call and she's angry, like she's mad, right? And my background is in domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking. So I'm very I brought her up to be aware of the things that could potentially happen when you go out on dates or when you invite people over to your house or, you know, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Intimate time with somebody you don't know that well.
That's right. Or even intimate times with people that you do know, because that can be, you can be sexually assaulted by somebody that you know. Right. So just kind of be aware, follow your gut, know that's your ancestors talking to you. Right. And warning you if those red flags are going up. And so, so she calls me, she's angry. She wants me to come and get her. I asked her if she was safe. She said, yes, I'm safe. And I said, where are you? And she said, I'm in the car. I made him get out of his car. And I said, okay. And she said, and I locked the doors and I'm like, okay, is it that bad? And she goes, no, I just don't want him back in his car. But he said some things in relation to that, right? In relation to, I bought you dinner and ice cream, and now you owe me this thing, right? Mm-hmm. Owe me your body because I did these things for you. And she asked him, like, does your mother know that you talk to young women like that? Like, what makes you think that that dinner and ice cream equals me? It doesn't. It's not even close, right? And so she was able to voice her boundary, voice her disapproval of
what colonization says. We're supposed to be lucky that a man talked to us,
right?
We're supposed to be grateful that a dude bought us ice cream,
right?
We're supposed to, you know, we're just,
the patriarchy tells us that, right? And the matriarchy tells us our value is not in dinner and ice cream.
The last Michelle,
yes,
right, is excuse me, I'm getting all riled up and wheezy.
I know.
We don't, and I know you and I are different because we're raised by crazy ethnic mothers, but it is such a distant memory for a lot of people in America what respect for women looks like or feels like. Mm-hmm. They haven't felt that in thousands of years in some different societies, right?
Yes.
So the fact that your daughter wasn't shamed even out of speaking up, you know, is huge. Oh, she's unmanageable. She's unruly. We're crazy, right?
She's definitely those two things.
But
in a good way.
And the fact that I played a small role in just giving, I like it when she's crazy on you. That's what makes me like the most happy.
when she matches my energy.
Yeah, when she just
that's one of the things that our youth need guidance in, right? Our youth, they don't know if we don't teach them. They don't know what dating looks like if we don't sit them down and go through the process. Like, what is this supposed to look like, right? And if we don't teach them and guide them and help them, then they're going to learn from people that are learning themselves, right? They're going to learn from the people who don't know the things. So how can we teach our youth? We have to talk to them about what healthy relationships look like, right? We have to have that discussion with them, that healthy. And if you don't know, there are resources out there right now. The California Consortium for Urban Indian Health, SCUI is what we call ourselves. We have our teen dating violence awareness months, like they're little reels. They're very quick. They are on our Instagram. You can find us at SCUI on our Instagram for SCUI. You can look us up on there. It's very easy to do.
I put the banner up because
Thank you.
it bugs me that you have 2 C's in it, but then each C has a different sound. So it's just always like livid.
You never get it right.
I'm pretty sure I've written at least one email about this.
And those reels that we encourage our adults within the community to look at those reels. And I know your teens don't want to talk to you. They seem like they don't want to talk to you about this stuff, but sit them down and talk to them anyways, right? And I'm not talking about like holding them hostage and tying them down, just say, hey, we should really talk about these things. You
don't have to take this. You don't have to like get into the whole thick of it, but guess what? You don't have to put out.
That's
guess
right.
What?
That's
you
right.
don't have to feel
pressure. And so those reels are a good starting point. So one of the reels is on cultural respect in a relationship, right? Especially for our native youth. Who may be dating somebody outside of their cultural, and ethnic groups. That so one of the things when we're talking about culture is that the person is not being disrespectful of your culture, that they're not making you feel ashamed of practicing your culture, that they're respectful of your spaces, right? Meaning, if I'm invited to ceremony and ceremony is something that my family goes to and I go, that person's not going to be mad that you went without them, or they're not going to be mad that they weren't invited. Not everything is for everybody, right? And so having those conversations with our youth to know this is what this looks like when it's healthy, and then also what it looks like when it's not healthy. So we have green flags, red flags. Green flags, the behaviors that we want to see in our partners, in our interpersonal relationships. That also goes for friendships, right? And then our red flags. These are the things that you'll see if it's a red flag, and we want to address those. We want to address those things. So we have sexual health on there. We have financial. We have technology. Like, there's a lot of different moving parts to these relationship talks. And these reels are a way for us as adults to look at them, and our youth to look at them and say, okay, these are the talking points. These are the talking points, right? And let's sit down and have this discussion. And usually we have with Camille, with my daughter, I would usually have these discussions watching like the dating shows, and we'd be like, ooh, that's ew, right? And so we made the educational part of it more like conversation, just hanging out and just having the conversation amongst ourselves while we're watching these toxic shows, right? So we're bringing attention to
while you're watching multiple seasons.
That's right.
Toxic.
Right. Right.
I see you. I know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be like, let's sit down at the dinner table and have this interaction.
Awkward, yeah.
It could be very, very open. It doesn't have to be difficult. It could just be, oh, did you see that? Like, ew, why would you want somebody talking to you like that? Or what would you do if somebody was talking to you like that? Right. And so these conversations are where our youth are going to learn how to interact in their relationships, right? And so it requires a trusted adult. It requires somebody that they trust to have those conversations. So that way, if they end up in a place where they're being abused, then they have somebody that they can go to and say, hey, this thing is happening, right?
You take the
And I
shame
don't
out
know
of
how to
it too.
navigate it. Yeah,
You know, just take the shame out of it.
that's right. That's right.
Reach out. Now, I'm going to keep you for a few more minutes here because I like your brain. Cece, who works for the association here, putting on the podcast years ago, like a decade ago, said domestic violence is a result of colonization. And that bugged me, and I didn't believe it because in nature, mama tigers nip their cubs, mama wolves bite their bratty kids. Like, existing in nature, there is some form of violence, right? So it just bugged me. And a few years ago, I said to you, I don't know if I believe that. And you explained to me that when it comes to domestic violence, it's not just the getting the slipper to the hiney or the wooden spoon, it's violence for the sake of dominating.
That is correct. So when we're talking domestic violence, sexual violence, economic violence, emotional abuse, it is about the power and control that you, the abuser, you, the person who is causing harm, right, has and can exert over the individual and the dynamic of that relationship. So interpersonal violence and domestic violence are both about domination and power and control. And oftentimes, I'm not saying that it can't happen. But oftentimes are individuals who are abusive and who are causing harm in relationships won't change because they don't have to change, right? Because they can cause harm and continue to cause harm. And once that individual is done, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be involved in this relationship. I'm going to leave this relationship, which, by the way, can be very, very dangerous for people who are leaving because the domination escalates, right? And it escalates to bring that individual back into control. So that's why when people who are being abused are leaving, particularly are the women in our lives that are leaving abusive relationships, that's why it's very dangerous at that point for them to leave, because who knows how far that person is willing to go.
Well, how scary. It's hard enough to leave, and now you're like, I'm going to get murdered today.
Right. So fear, when we're talking about our teens, can you imagine the fear that they probably have? Because our teens often, they don't know who to go to. They don't know who's going to be a trusted adult. They don't feel
want to
like
get somebody in trouble.
They don't want to get somebody in trouble. They don't want people looking at them as though they're the problem, right? Or they don't want their family members to get in trouble, because I know that if I shared certain things with the men in my family, that if somebody were to cause harm for me or my daughter, right, that the men in my family would just show up and be like, where are they, right? Where are they, and how can we hurt them?
Old school justice,
right? But those are things that could cause fear, not only in our adult people that are in these situations, right, our adult survivors, but in our youth. So who can they trust? How can you be that trusted adult, right? And it starts with just that kind of that roundabout conversation that we want to start having with them, and to let them know, I'm somebody that you can trust. And if you're involved in a situation like this, we'll try and figure out how to help, right? We'll try and figure out how to do this together. And that means finding somebody, a program, you could reach out to our our red line, which is actually a peer support worm line for California, for our Native communities in California. Matter of fact, it's ringing right now. I don't know if you could hear that. Or you could reach out to Strong-Hearted Native Women's Network, or you can reach out to Sacred Hearts, so there's a lot of different Native programming that's out there that can help guide you to the places that you need to go to help our youth that are actively in potentially harmful relationships. And I always suggest that when our youth are involved in unhealthy relationships, be that a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a non-binary partner, or even a friend group, right? Because our friends sometimes are not very kind, and we need to also guide our youth through those kinds of relationships as well. So when we're talking interpersonal violence, teen dating awareness violence, that we're just talking about those kinds of unhealthy relationships, and we want to help guide our youth. And we teach our youth, we break the cycle. Right?
Yeah, that's how it has to stop. Oh,
yeah.
Do you see that we have a message here? Can you see the screen?
Oh yeah, it's Brooklyn. Hi. We love you too. Give the baby hugs and kisses for me.
And again, that's why, I love the little comment from Brooklyn, because it really is, it's hard. And that's what me and the last Michelle, Shenandoah, talked about. It's really hard to comprehend matriarchal. It seems to be, okay, well, if women are in charge, then men are going to be treated the way women have. And that's not even close to the truth, because none of us have time to go run around oppressing men. Like, we got much.
Why would I want to? I need you to pick that really heavy thing up for me. So why would I want to oppress you? Like, no, get over here and help me.
Yes. But an equal partnership seems to be, and in contrast, again, talking about the teens, what we see on TV, how trash television is celebrated, and without a mom or auntie like us guiding and starting conversations, you go, oh, I have to act like this to be loved. I have to act like this to get attention, and that's,
I'm watching like 90 Day Fiance, and I'm thinking, oh, no, these are all red flag behaviors.
Big Brother is my biggest trash. I haven't got into those other shows yet. I know you've read
my guilty pleasure,
and Love Island makes me feel disgusted and like
because it is disgusting.
It's like I'm just shocked that
And I love how on these specific shows, like, people are like, oh, family values, and I need a healthy relationship, and then they're doing all of the nasty things that, like,
all of their bikini
and it's funny because I'm not a bbig square, right? Like, I'm not a big square, and I'm open, and like, everybody do your do, but you don't have to be all over the place like that. And really, that comes to that concept of, am I a sacred person?
But it celebrates the who is desperate enough to do what I want to win this whatever.
Right. Well,
because you're not sacred.
Is that like sacred behavior? Are you practicing, and
like you said, sacred doesn't mean true.
Yeah.
But that respect. But they like the girls who is willing to debase himself, or who is willing to cutthroat somebody for me, or who is willing. We should not be put in situations for somebody to love us.
Yeah.
So
that's right there.
All right. So you mentioned Sakui.org, but this is a national platform here. So you mentioned like Strong Hearts. Is that a good place people that are not in California can? And the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. But
yes, if you're Native, so I know I said red line, and that red line was created specifically for California Native or Native communities throughout California. But if you're Native and you need resources and you need support, it's a peer support warm line. You can call. We're not gonna turn anybody away. They're gonna ask you if you're Native, and If the answer is yes, then they're going to ask your tribal affiliation, not because they want to track that, right? It's more along the lines of how can we help you in a good way, right? Not everybody on the line is California native. So we have a lot of different cultures represented on our line. We have a Lakota girl. We have somebody that is from California, who is California native. We have somebody that is Purapecha and Mexica that helps to answer the lines. So we always want to make sure that we're being culturally responsive when people call us. And so they're going to ask you what your tribal affiliation is. So that way they can see if they can find resources that are Native specific for you in the area that you live. If you live on your traditional homelands, and if you don't, then you let them know that too, and they'll help to kind of guide you closer to what is more culturally responsive for you.
Well, that's so awesome. I appreciate you sneaking a little time in for us today, and I can't believe like this month's already over, but we can both get gold stars for getting an interview
Can I put it right here?
And then off the books. Yes. I want to put like little gold stars to cover all the wrinkles.
I know. I was doing my makeup earlier today, and I was like, "Who is that old lady that just? Oh my god!" No. Although I have my anti-streak right here, so I really like it.
No, I'm not getting the anti-streak. I'm getting the overall witch of the woods, just random grays. Right? I don't have anything cool happening or organized. It's just
right,
like chia pet.
I also want to throw this out there that if you have somebody that is within our youth community that needs to talk to somebody that doesn't want to necessarily talk to a therapist, but just needs somebody to listen to them, and please hand them the red line number. Okay. And you could get that number at sakui.org.
And you can text and stuff too, because you guys are
you can chat from your computer, your laptop, you can text. So I know our youth likes to text, and so we have people that text as well. And so give them the number, because we can also help them directly. We're here to help our communities, and we really, really, really want to make sure that our youth are getting the assistance that they need.
Yeah, and you're not going to judge or tattle.
Nope, there's no judging, there's no tattling. We are mandated reporters. We will let our youth know that that's the case, and that if they're sharing information, but they also can call us anonymously, and they can also text and chat anonymously. So ultimately, everybody can. So ultimately, if somebody's calling in and they want to talk about certain things, they absolutely can. And our people on our line are not going to be judgy about anything that they have to say. Yeah.
Well, Michelle, I've talked so much today. my tongue went. That
was my start.
Michelle Sanchez Higginbotham, thank you for your time. And if you call Redline, I've done it before. Like, is Michelle there? I want to talk to Michelle. You can totally bug her directly, and that will bring me psychic happiness.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not on the red line anymore. Well, it's not unfortunate. So I'm the Rising Together program coordinator for Sakui. I'm the anti-violence project coordinator. So yeah, I've been doing.
Organizations can reach out to you, right? Like Indian Health things are like, so you're
absolutely,
you're not answering the red line, and then where can people find you? Can they access you to contact you through sakui.org?
They can, or they can reach me at Michelle at Rising Together, RISING together at ccuih.org. That's my email. I check it all the time.
Yeah, and we'll get you on too to do a full conversation.
That would be fantastic. Yeah,
and
I love talking with you.
But I just wanted to sneak you in and share you because I haven't shared you with this new audience of friends.
Hello, audience
and listeners. So, no, it really was the day of Michelle's, but I did it.
Love it. I love it. I was listening to Michelle earlier, and I was going.
She's amazing, right? Like, it messed me up a little bit because it feels so impossible when it comes to equal rights and respect. Like, the concept is very simple, but when we look at the machine and this administration and how certain people need us to be property and breeding cows and all that stuff, it starts to feel impossible. And the work that both of you are doing in your respective fields that are kind of opposite things, they're very much the same and very much really pushing these core concepts forward.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about our survivors, right? Our survivors of abuse, we are trying to empower them after their power has been stripped from them, broken down, pushed down. We're trying to help them find that power and control again, right? And even our LGBTQ community, helping them to find that power within themselves.
Well, it's even harder with the lack of respect or abuse or being closeted secrets or fetishized or a thing you
which
like
is something that we are, right? As Native people, we're very much fetishized.
So there's a different level of it. So I appreciate the work you do. And we're going to keep chatting on air, on Red Hoop Talk, on your couch. And one of these days,
all till 1 o'clock in the morning as usual.
One of these days, we're going to nail it, right? And get that one sentence that just fixes everybody.
It's a journey. It's a journey. And
if anybody calls Redline, if anybody calls and says I hit them, they're lying.
I know that's true. I know that's true because you won't even spank Marple. So
right. Oh, Lord help us. Well, I appreciate you very much, and I will talk to you soon. And I'm really glad that we just even got to do a few minutes about it because, again, we don't always think about these things.
Yeah. Thank you for having me online.
All right. Well, I appreciate
nice to meet everybody. I look forward to coming on again.
Yeah. If you got issues, bug her, not me. Right. She spends more time trying to problem solve. I spend more time trying to just avoid the problems. So. All right. Well, all right. I'll see you this weekend.
Yes, you will.
There we go.
Okay.
Well, that was our February Red Hoop Talk. I sure appreciate you guys being with us. Available in podcast form next day. And if you got any questions, you can bug me, redhooptalk@gmail.com or the association, social medias. But yeah, let's just keep connected and keep trying to take care of each other the best we can. All right, Chihulele, I love y'all so hard. And until next month, we'll see you then.